Think of a medieval castle. What comes to mind? Probably a dark, damp, drafty stone fortress, right? A place where everyone was shivering and miserable all winter long. Well, what if I told you that's mostly a myth? Forget the grim stereotype. Medieval life had some surprisingly clever comfort hacks that history classes never taught us. Let's uncover how people in the Middle Ages actually kept themselves warm and cozy. First, let's talk about the heart of the castle, the Great Hall. The central fireplace was an absolute game changer. These weren't just for show, they were massive, roaring hearths, often built right in the middle of the room or against a main wall. The sheer amount of heat they produced was incredible. The smoke would either escape through a hole in the roof, called a louver, or later through a proper chimney. Imagine the whole household gathering around this immense source of warmth, telling stories, eating, and working. It was the social and thermal center of their world, but they didn't just rely on a single fire. To make the most of that heat, they used one of the most brilliant inventions of the time: tapestries. We often see them in movies as purely decorative, but their main job was insulation. These huge, heavy woven cloths were hung on the cold stone walls. They acted like a barrier, trapping a layer of air between the fabric and the stone. This simple trick dramatically reduced drafts and prevented the cold from radiating into the room. It's the same principle as wearing layers of clothing. The tapestries didn't just add warmth, they also added color, art, and life to the stone interiors, making them feel much more like a home and less like a dungeon. Rich lords would have incredibly elaborate and expensive tapestries, showcasing their wealth and telling epic stories, all while keeping everyone toasty. Now, let's move to the bedchamber. This is where things get really interesting. You've probably seen those grand four-poster beds with curtains all around them. They look fancy, but they were actually a genius piece of climate control technology. These are called canopy beds, and the heavy drapes weren't just for privacy. When you drew the curtains at night, you created a tiny, enclosed space. Your own body heat would quickly warm up this room within a room, creating a cozy little microclimate that stayed warm all night long. It was incredibly effective. You could be in a large, chilly room, but inside your curtain bed, you'd be snug as a bug. The wealthiest people had beds made of carved oak with thick velvet curtains, but even simpler versions of this concept were used by those with fewer means. And what about on the floor? You wouldn't find people walking around on bare, freezing stone. The floors were often covered with rushes, dried reeds and grasses, mixed with sweet-smelling herbs like lavender or chamomile. This created a thick, insulating layer that was much warmer and softer underfoot. When the top layer got dirty, they wouldn't necessarily throw it all out. They would often just sweep it clean and add a fresh layer of rushes and herbs on top. This not only helped with insulation, but also with hygiene, as the herbs helped to mask odors and repel pests. It was a simple, renewable, and surprisingly effective form of medieval carpeting. Personal warmth was a big deal too. Clothing was all about layers. People wore undergarments made of linen, and then layered wool tunics, cloaks, and leggings on top. Wool is a fantastic insulator, even when it gets a little damp. For the wealthy, furs were the ultimate luxury and status symbol. Linings of ermine, sable, or fox fur on cloaks and gowns weren't just for show. They provided an incredible amount of warmth. Imagine wrapping yourself in a heavy, fur-lined cloak on a cold winter's day. That's serious comfort. They also had mittens, hats, and warm leather boots, often lined with wool or fur as well. Let's also talk about hygiene, because it's closely related to comfort. The idea that medieval people never bathed is another huge myth. While they didn't have modern plumbing, bathing was a common and social activity. Public bathhouses were popular in towns and cities, offering hot water, steam rooms, and even services like haircuts and food. It was like a medieval spa day. For the nobility in their castles, a wooden tub would be brought into a private chamber, filled with water heated over the fire, and often scented with herbs and flowers. Being clean was associated with good health and piety. They used soap made from animal fat and ash, and washed their hands before and after meals. They even had herbal concoctions for fresh breath and used linen towels to dry off. It wasn't the sterile world we know today, but it was far from the filth we often imagine. Another clever trick was the use of hot water bottles. Well, not exactly bottles. They would heat up stones or special ceramic containers by the fire, wrap them in cloth, and place them in their beds to pre-warm the sheets before they got in. It's the same basic idea as the electric blankets we use today. It's a small thing, but imagine the simple luxury of sliding into a pre-warmed bed after a long, cold day. These little hacks show a real desire for personal comfort. And what about windows? Early castles had small window slits, mainly for defense, which did let in drafts. But over time, things improved. Wooden shutters were standard, which could be closed at night to block the wind. For the wealthy, panes of glass became more common in the later Middle Ages. But even before that, they had clever solutions. Sometimes they would use thinly sliced pieces of polished horn or oiled parchment stretched over a frame. This was translucent, so it let in light during the day, but it did a much better job of keeping out the wind and rain than an open hole in the wall. So, when we piece it all together, the central hearth, the insulating tapestries, the cozy canopy beds, the rush-covered floors, the layered wool clothing, and the warm baths, a very different picture of medieval life emerges. It wasn't a constant struggle for survival in the freezing cold. It was a world of innovative people who used the resources they had to make their lives as comfortable and pleasant as possible. They understood insulation, they valued cleanliness, and they craved warmth, just like we do. The dark, cold castle is a powerful image, but it's largely a caricature. The reality was much more nuanced, more human, and frankly, a lot warmer. So next time you see a movie set in a dreary medieval fortress, remember the hidden comforts and clever hacks that made a castle a home. Thanks for watching! If you enjoyed this peek into the cozier side of history, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more myth-busting content. See you next time!